When the mountain begins to speak. The laughter in the room was thin and uneasy, the kind that existed only to keep fear from showing its teeth. It rippled through the town hall and died quickly. Silas allowed himself a narrow smile, not amusement but control. Humor, used carefully, was like a flare in bad weather. It could light the danger without setting the whole place on fire. "Let me see the photos," he said. Gus passed the phone across the table. Silas studied the images in silence. The fracture line cutting the slope like a wound, the survey marker half buried, the coordinates stamped in the corner. Then he lifted his eyes to the projected map on the wall and stared at it as if it had personally offended him. "You've had heavy snowfall for days," Silas said, tapping the screen. Then a temperature rise. "Rain on snow is one of the most reliable destabilizers we know. Water moves under the slab, friction drops. Add vibration, drilling, tracked equipment, and you're not testing the mountain. You're provoking it." Someone near the back cleared their throat. "So, you're saying avalanche?" Silas tilted his head slightly. "Could be a slab release. Could be a ground slide beneath the snowpack. Either way, the mountain doesn't care what we call it." A man from Northline shifted in his seat, his smile tightening like a belt pulled one notch too far. "With respect, this is speculative." "With respect," Silas replied evenly. "Speculation is what gets people killed when they wait to evacuate until a hillside introduces itself through their living room." The room changed. Doubt leaned toward fear, and fear, when faced honestly, had a way of becoming wisdom. That was when Coda growled. Not at Gus, not at the crowd, at the back doors. It was low and controlled, the sound of a working dog issuing a warning without panic. Every spine in the room prickled. Heads turned toward the glass just as headlights swept past. Too bright, too close. A tracked utility vehicle rolled along the road outside, engine rattling, metal undercarriage clanking like teeth. Coda lunged forward just enough for Gus to catch his collar. The dog's nose flared hard, eyes sharp and locked. Gus smelled it a heartbeat later. Diesel. And beneath it, something metallic and sour. An echo of explosives from another life. The lights flickered. Not a blackout, just a stutter, like the building blinked. Then came the sound. A distant boom, deep and muted, traveling through the floor more than the air. The kind of sound you felt in your bones before your ears understood it. Silence followed, thick, heavy, absolute. No one spoke. The mayor's mouth opened and closed, searching for the old world where meetings stayed polite. Leia was already reaching for her radio. Silas's face went very still. Gus released Coda's collar slowly. His pulse was steady in that terrible way it used to be in combat. Calm born not of peace, but of knowing exactly what comes next if you do nothing. "That," Gus said quietly, "is the mountain answering." The mayor stood, his voice shedding politics and finding steel. "Emergency management. Do we have authority to order evacuation?" Leia's radio crackled as she spoke fast and precise. "Requesting immediate activation. Pre-evac advisory for Pinehaven, Lower Valley, East Ridge. Potential slope failure on Kestrel North Face." The reply came garbled, but clear enough. "Copy. Stand by. Initiate local procedures." The room moved past argument. A mother pulled her child close. An elderly man muttered a prayer. Someone whispered, "My cats." And another voice answered with strained humor, "Bring the cats. Bring the attitude too." Even Gus felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Not joy, just the small human relief of not being alone. Tasks were assigned. The school gym, the church basement, buses for seniors, deputies for door-to-door. Leia coordinated. Silas scribbled hazard lines with a pen that shook not from age, but urgency. Gus didn't take command. He didn't need to. He became what he had always been, the steady hand that moves when others freeze. He offered his truck. He named the roads that would ice first. Coda stayed pressed to his leg, watching the way fear drifted through the room like invisible smoke. When the meeting broke into motion, Gus stepped outside into falling snow. The town siren wailed, a single old unit near the firehouse, its rising cry cutting through the dark. Pine Haven stirred. Doors slammed. Engines turned. Footsteps multiplied. Gus watched people move and felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Belonging. He looked down at Coda. The dog's amber eyes met his, steady and present, as if to say, "This is what opening a door means." Above them, Kestrel Peak loomed in silence, patient and unmoved. For now, the snow moved. Night did not fall gently over Pine Haven. It came down like a lid slammed onto a pot already boiling. The evacuation emptied the streets, but the town did not sleep. Lights burned in the school gym. Space heaters hummed in the church basement. Radios spilled clipped voices into the cold, urgent and tireless. Gus stood outside the staging area as snow crusted his shoulders. The fabric of his jacket had stiffened with frost. His clean-shaven jaw set in that quiet way men learned when panic became a luxury they could no longer afford. Coda pressed close to his left leg, black and tan coat bristling under the porch light. His amber eyes swept the darkness like twin lanterns. There was a slight hitch in his front paw, a reminder of old damage. But his focus was unbroken, his posture proud, as if the entire valley were his assignment. Gus didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a hinge, one of those small, unnoticed things that only mattered when a door had to swing at exactly the right moment. Leia Hart moved through the crowd with practiced speed, parka hood up, dark hair tucked away, cheeks red from the wind. Her voice on the radio was calm the way a winter river was calm. Deep, not safe. Beside her stood Silas Renan, wrapped in a tweed coat that made him look like a professor dragged from a library and dropped into a blizzard. His wire-frame glasses fogged with every breath, and he wiped them clean again and again, as if clarity itself were a duty he owed the mountain. Near the bus line, a sheriff's deputy argued with a volunteer, his voice sharp with fear disguised as authority. Barnes, late 40s, thick mustache, eyes that measured trouble before humanity. "We can't keep the road closed all night," he insisted. "People are going to try to go back for belongings." Leia's gaze pinned him in place. "They can try," she said evenly, "and you can explain to their families why you let them." Silas folded a map, his hands trembling. Not weakness, but the body's quiet confession that it understood risk. Above them, the mountain held its breath. Time slid forward strangely. The wind rose, fell, then rose again. The air grew too warm for the amount of snow on the ground. A wrongness Gus felt under his skin. Coda's nose worked constantly, pulling in invisible truths. Diesel, sweat, pine sap, and beneath it all, the faint sour tang of disturbed earth. Gus watched the dog more than the sky. A man could lie with his mouth. A dog told the truth with his body. Then it happened. Not an explosion. Not a dramatic crack. It began with a deep whump, a muffled settling that rolled through the valley floor like a giant exhale. The lights at the edge of town flickered. Every voice stopped for one suspended heartbeat. Then the mountain roared. Snow, rock, and broken timber tore loose from the north slope, not flowing like water, but charging like a living wall finally released from gravity's patience. Came in waves. First powder, leaping into the air like smoke. Then heavy slabs that snapped trees as if they were matchsticks. The sound was not just loud. It was consuming. It filled the chest, pressed against the ribs, made it hard to remember there was such a thing as breath. A road vanished. A transformer popped, throwing a brief spray of sparks into the storm like desperate stars. Barnes swore under his breath, bravado draining fast. Silas went pale. "There," he whispered. "That's the release plane." Leia didn't freeze. Her voice cut clean through the chaos. "All units, confirm head count. No one goes back up. Repeat, no one." Gus felt his heartbeat slow instead of spike. Old training settled over him like a firm hand on a panicked animal. "We're moving," he said. Coda's ears snapped forward. The avalanche spared most of Pine Haven. Maps, luck, and human movement mattered, but it carved a wound into the valley. A side road serving a handful of cabins was gone. Emergency lights flared at the edge of the slide path. Voices rose through static. Martha Keene not accounted for. Family on Cedar Spur truck stuck. Leia's eyes met Gus's for a fraction of a second. Not an order. Not a plea. Recognition. Gus nodded once. He and Coda joined a small rescue team. With them came a new medic, Caleb Drummond. Early 30s, slender but strong, sandy hair plastered to his forehead under a helmet. His eyes were quick and kind, the kind that made fear feel slightly embarrassed. "I hear you're the mountain guy," Caleb said as they climbed into a tracked vehicle. "Try not to prove it tonight." Gus's mouth twitched. "I'll do my best to disappoint you." The vehicle crawled toward the slide perimeter, treads grinding over packed snow. Floodlights revealed the damage in brutal clarity. Trees snapped mid-trunk, ice slabs the size of tables. The hillside peeled open like a wound. Coda stood braced in the back, paws steady, nose high. He avoided areas that looked deceptively smooth. His instincts weren't mystical. They were earned. They found the first crisis quickly. A snowmobile lay tipped into a shallow ravine. A teenager clung to it, face white, lips blue, one glove missing. "Leo Jensen," he stammered. "My grandpa, he's back there." Coda pulled hard to the right. They found the older man pinned by snow and a fallen branch, alive, shaking, furious with his own helplessness. They worked carefully, freeing him without waking the slope again. When they wrapped him in a foil blanket, it crinkled like paper in a church. "I thought I was done," the man whispered. "A lot of people think that," Gus said gently. "The mountain doesn't always agree." They moved on. At Cedar Spur, the road had become a trap. A truck sat half-sunk, headlights burning stubbornly. Inside were a mother, a father, and a small girl bundled in coats too big for her. Coda circled the downhill side and stopped dead. One sharp bark. Gus saw it. A thin fissure spreading through the snowpack like a seam being pulled apart. "Out. Now." The father hesitated. Gus stepped closer, voice steel. "Move. If you want your daughter to grow up, you move." They saved the people, not the truck. Winter always collected its due. On the way back, Coda lunged toward a snowbank and began digging. Fast, frantic. Gus knelt, heart tight. A small white and tan dog lay wedged in a hollow, barely breathing. The collar tag read, "Pip." Gus lifted the tiny body into his jacket. Coda pressed close, lending warmth without command. Back at the gym, a small, fierce woman in her 70s broke through the crowd and took the dog with shaking hands. Martha Keene's anger melted into relief. "I shouldn't have gone back," she whispered. "Well," Gus said dryly, "let's not make it a habit." The mountain quieted. For the moment, and the night, having taken what it would, finally loosened its grip. The door that stayed open. The storm had passed, but Pinehaven carried its memory in every frozen puddle and snow-laden branch. Gus walked the narrow path toward his cabin, Coda padding beside him, paws crunching over crusted snow. The air smelled of pine, diesel from the emergency vehicles, and something faintly metallic, remnants of the avalanche's violence. At the cabin, the porch light hung like a small moon, frosted over but steady. Gus's breath fogged the air as he reached for the door. It creaked open, slower than usual, but without resistance. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of straw and pine, the small stove embers cold. No bodies, no panic, no traces of violence. Only footprints. For tiny sets, and one large, leading away into the forest, straight and purposeful. Gus followed them with his eyes. The wolf mother had left her pups before the mountain fell, moving them the way wild things did. Quietly, instinctively, without ceremony. He didn't feel abandoned. He felt honored. Coda sniffed the tracks, pausing briefly before looking up at Gus. Ears forward. "Good call," Gus murmured. Not for the wolf. Not just for the dog. For the chain of decisions that had turned him from a man watching life from afar into a part of it. The cabin door stayed open behind them, not because it had to, but because it could. Because it was a threshold. One that might one day shelter someone in danger, offer warmth, or hold space for mercy. Gus hammered a small wooden sign near the path. Kestrel Shelter Winter Warning Support. Simple letters, no claims of grandeur. A place to survive. A chance. That night, Kota lay on the porch steps beside him, ears pricked to the dark forest. Not in fear, but in watchfulness. The mountain was quiet, and quiet felt different now. Less like isolation, more like invitation. Gus stared into the darkness where the wolf tracks had vanished, a strange warmth settling in his chest. Not joy, not pride, but something heavier. Responsibility, connection, the understanding that opening a door, literally or metaphorically, was a kind of courage, sometimes invisible, sometimes unnoticed. Somewhere deep, he remembered the marine rule he'd carried for years. Never leave lives behind when you can carry them through the storm. That rule hadn't just saved people that night. It had saved him from the isolation he had worn like armor. Sometimes miracles weren't blinding or cinematic. Sometimes they were simple. A door left open, a steady hand, a loyal companion, and the small, quiet chance to choose life over fear. Gus exhaled. The mountain slept, the forest held its breath, and in the third night of winter, he understood what opening a door could mean. Kota nudged him gently, and Gus smiled down at his faithful companion. Some storms would come again, but the door would stay open.